Krishna. Jagannath Baldeswaramai ki jai. Jai. Panchatattva ki jai. Giri Govardhan ki jai. Shad Goswami ki jai. Guru Parampara ki jai. Gurudev ki jai. Tagore Hari. Om Gyan Tibrandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurun Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Namo Vishnupadaya Krishna Preshtaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swami Niti Namane. Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pracharane Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschati Deshatarane. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shri Vasadi Gauravakta Vrinda. Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. So Hare Krishna, Prabhu Swataji, welcome all of you and thank you for joining and keeping the appointment with Krishna. So chapter 2, we are continuing with the contents of the Gita summarized, and today's verse is 2.61, Prabhu. Yeah, 2.61. Tani sarvani samyamya yukta asita matparaha vashehi yasyendriyani tasya prajna pratishtita. Tani sarvani samyamya yukta asita matparaha vashehi yasyendriyani tasya prajna pratishtita. Translation by Prabhupada. One who restrains his senses, keeping them under full control, and fixes his consciousness upon me, is known as a man of steady intelligence. So, Prabhu Mataji, we have been discussing this chapter, and today being Ekadashi is all the more auspicious to hear, read, and recite Srimad Bhagavad Gita. See, in this 54th verse, this chapter, Arjuna asks 4 questions, right? You might remember how to recognize a person who is situated in Krishna consciousness, very self-realized soul, or a sthita pragya. The 4 questions were: what are the general symptoms? How does he speak? How does he sit? And how does he walk? So Krishna answers the first question. That is the general description and characteristics of a self-realized person. So he answers in 2.55. That is, he gives up all material desires of sense gratification born out of mental concoction. And thus purified in mind, one finds satisfaction in the self alone. The second question was, how does he speak? This is answered in 56 and 57, where Krishna says, he is equipoised in happiness and distress, he is free from attachment, fear and anger, and unaffected by good and evil, and firmly fixed in perfect knowledge. The third question was, how does he sit? Krishna answers in 2.58 and 59. See, how does he sit implies how he restrains his senses and mentality. It's not that actually he's sitting, right? The answer is, he uses his senses only for Krishna's service. So based on a hierarchy, he can control his senses. And the analogy given here is that about the tortoise and devotee. This implies to keep senses always in service of the Lord and withdraw the senses when not required. And the fourth question, will come later on, was how does he walk? So it's 64 to 71, we can see. So how does he engage his senses? The answer was, while engaging senses, he does with regulation and religious principles. So in the 4 verses, 58, 59, 60, and 61, Krishna discusses how to control the senses. He explains the method of restriction from sense objects and its risks. And he gives a glimpse of Bhakti Yoga, by which one engages the senses in his devotional service. That's what in 61 just now we saw, no? Tani sarvani samyamya yukta asita matparaha vashehi yasyendriyani tasya pragya pratishtita. That he says, one who restrains the senses, keeping them under full control, and fixes his consciousness upon me, is known as a man of steady intelligence. See, in the purport, Prabhupada gives 3 points. Number 1, one whose senses and mind are fully engaged in Krishna is the topmost yogi. Number 2, if one is not Krishna conscious, it is not at all possible to control the senses. And number 3, the Yoga Sutra prescribes meditation on Vishnu and not on the void. So as example of a topmost yogi, Srila Prabhupada describes the life of King Ambarisha. So the principle in his yoga practice was to engage his mind and all his senses in the service of the Supreme Lord Krishna. So in Srimad Bhagavatam, this was given by Prabhupada in this purport itself, in Srimad Bhagavatam, 9th canto, 4th chapter, verses 18 to 20, it is very nicely described. So how King Ambarisha engages himself. Number 1, he fixed his mind on the lotus feet of Krishna. His words in describing abode of the Lord. His hands in cleansing the Lord, temple of the Lord. Ears in hearing pastimes of the Lord. Eyes in seeing the form of the Lord. Body in touching the body of the devotee. Nostrils in smelling flavor of flowers offered to the lotus feet of the Lord. Tongue in tasting tulsi leaves offered to him. His legs in traveling to the holy place where his temple is situated. His head in offering obeisances to the Lord. And his desires in fulfilling the desires of the Lord. So thus his consciousness was fixed on the Lord by devotional service. So in this connection, Prabhupada quotes Acharya Srila Baladeva Vidyabhushan, who has stated, the senses can be completely controlled. The senses can be completely controlled by the strength of devotional service to Krishna. And Prabhupada, in his book Path of Perfection, he says, Maharaj Ambarisha was an ordinary king. But his one great qualification was that he was always thinking of Krishna. Thus, his mind was always controlled and was situated at the highest perfection level of yoga. See, we also can very easily control the mind by keeping it fixed on the lotus feet of Krishna within. He's in the heart of everyone, right? So simply by thinking of Krishna, we become victorious, conquerors, and topmost yogis. See, my Guru Maharaj has said that in the whole of Bhagavad Gita, if you want to remember a single word, then it is Samyam. Samyam. Srila Prabhupada, in his word-to-word equivalent, has mentioned the meaning for Samyam here is keeping under control. See, we all know that the Supreme Lord Krishna is the master of all creation. And our existence in this world is also because of his mercy. He has given us this life and all the basic necessities, like air, water, food, clothing, shelter, correct? So in spite of knowing these truths, our senses go hither and thither. Just like a mad elephant, it spoils the paddy field. Our wandering senses not only drive us crazy, but also cause us havoc in the lives of people around us. But how can we control our senses? Is it possible to control them? So to make us understand the practicality of Samyamya, Srila Prabhupada in the purport in this verse gives us the example of Maharaj Ambarisha, who in spite of being the ruler of the whole world, he was able to have perfect control of the senses, even under the testing situations. See, when Durvasa Muni, out of envy, misused his mystic potency and created a demon to kill Maharaj Ambarisha, because he was in Ekadashi fasting, but to finish off the fasting, to break the fasting, he had just taken water, but Durvasa Muni had not yet come. So before offering the food to Durvasa, so Maharaj Ambarish neither got agitated nor he was sad. And he was neither fearful nor did he cry to the Lord to protect him or provide justice. Maharaj Ambarish was simply thinking of the lotus feet of the Supreme Lord in his heart. And he considered this incident also as Lord's mercy to return back to him faster. So this was because of his practice of engaging all his senses in the service of the Lord. Just now we saw, right? Hand, legs, eyes, how he used it. So how we can control these senses in our day-to-day life? Savai Mana Krishna Padar Vendayor. That is a 9th canto. That's full 2 verses, 9, 4, 18 to 20. See, it constantly engage our mind in the lotus feet of the Supreme Lord. See, though the mind is a subtle sense, it is very powerful. And if not controlled, it will overpower us and will be the cause of our ultimate destruction. Correct? So its tendency is to wander and especially stray away towards those things which takes us our consciousness away from Krishna. Very important point to understand. And Ambrish Maharaj, he was a great devotee of the Lord. See, we may point this out as an excuse to say that because Ambrish Maharaj was a great devotee of the Lord, he was able to engage his mind. He was able to engage his mind on the lotus feet of Krishna. Whereas we are limited, and it is not possible to engage our mind in Krishna. We will give an excuse, right? If we think honestly, we may understand that after all, we are responsible for managing only our own family only, little family. Whereas Maharaj Ambrish had to take the responsibility of managing the entire world. How much more anxiety he must have had. From where he got the time to remember the Lord? The answer is that he was able to see the Lord everywhere and in everything. Hari Sarvatra Sarvada. So even though he was busy managing the day-to-day affairs of his kingdom, he was consciously doing it as a service to the Supreme Lord Krishna. And whatever the result may be, he saw Krishna in the result and dedicated it back to Krishna. Since he saw Krishna in everyone and in everything, even though he was engaged in the day-to-day affairs, he did his service of managing the kingdom immaculately. With full realization that the service, the object of service and the result of service are different from forms of the same Supreme Personality of God Krishna. So in this way, he was able to fully control the mind. So one may still argue, how can I see Krishna in everything all the time? This is next to impossible. So Bhagavatam gives us a practical way to control the mind and engage it in Krishna's service through the transcendental instruction of Jadabrata Maharaj in 5th canto, 11th chapter, 17th verse. Just listen what he says. This uncontrolled mind is the greatest enemy of the living entity. If one neglects it or gives it a chance, it will grow more and more powerful and will become victorious. Although it is not factual, it is very strong. It covers the constitutional position of the soul. So he says, O king, please try to conquer this mind by the weapon of service to the lotus feet of the spiritual master and of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Do this with great care. So, by serving the lotus feet of the spiritual master and Lord Krishna, that is, strictly following their instructions, we can control the mind and automatically engage it in the remembering them all the time. So, how do we develop this steadiness of mind? That's why in 2.56 we say, Dukeshan Anudvikrimanaha, Sukeshu Vigata Spraha, Vita Raga Bhaya Krodaha, Stita Dhir Munir Uchate. One who is not disturbed in mind even amidst threefold miseries, or elated when there is happiness and who is free from all attachment, fear, and anger, is called a sage of steady mind. So, how do we develop this steady mind? See, in the purport of this verse, so 61, which we recited, Prabhupada quoted, Baladeva Vidyabhushan. He says, senses can be completely controlled by the strength of devotional service to Krishna. And Prabhupada states that devotional service is like a fire which burns up all kinds of impurities. So by practicing devotional service in association of devotees, we will have the opportunity to pass the test of the threefold miseries by remaining fixed in the attitude of dasanudasa, or being servant of the Lord. And in that attitude, carry on our service, even though we experience some bodily discomfort. Sudama Vipra was embarrassed, he was embarrassed to offer Krishna the humble offering of chipped rice that he had brought for him. He was hiding it, he didn't want to give. However, because that chipped rice was the best he had to offer, and because he only wanted to please Krishna, then Krishna became so completely pleased, and he thereafter reciprocated with Sudama Vipra for beyond his imagination. So very good, important points to raise, understand, no? Because the chipped rice was the best he had to offer, and because he only wanted to please Krishna. 2 points very important to understand. So this way, Krishna will be so much pleased, he will reciprocate. So in this way, anyone can invoke the loving reciprocation from Krishna, provided he serves the Lord sincerely to his best capacity. After all, Krishna is our proprietor of all things. Therefore, the only thing which we really have to offer is our sincere endeavor to please him. And by following the example of Sudama Vipra, in offering the best we have in the service of Krishna, be it opulent or simple, every conditioned soul in this world can be delivered from the state of body consciousness. See, the basis of peace is to fix the intelligence on one perfect goal. And such a state of intelligence is called Vivasatmika buddhihi, or one-pointed intelligence. See, the great sage Parasara Muni accepts Krishna as the ultimate goal on which to fix the intelligence. Parasara Muni had stated that one who is full in 6 opulences, who has full strength, full fame, wealth, knowledge, beauty, and renunciation, is Bhagavan, all the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So while Krishna was present on this earth, he displayed all the 6 opulences, and that too unlimitedly. So therefore, great sages like Parasara Muni, they've all accepted Krishna as the Supreme Personality of Godhead. By accepting Krishna as the ultimate goal of his life, the heart of a devotee becomes very beautiful. To the demands of senses of material elements, he will totally ignore that. In this way, he attains perfect peace. So the price he pays in order to fully get this experience is to accept the process of devotional service, which Krishna recommends in Bhagavad Gita. And by his discharge of devotional service unto Krishna, Krishna reveals himself to the devotee. So let us all fix our consciousness on Krishna as the goal of our lives through sincere practice of devotional service. Thank you very much, Professor Mataji. Grantra Srimad Bhagavad Gita ki Jai Shri Prabhupada. Tagore Vancha Kalpatarubhascha Kripa Sindhubhaya Patidanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. Hare Krishna, Professor Mataji. Thank you very much for joining.